My mother sent fake evidence to my husband to get a divorce because she knew about her own infidelity, but now she gives me free time to ruin her life. Hello, my name is Alice and I'm 28 years old. As I write this, I'm here because my married life is in ruins. My husband, Jasper, filed for divorce yesterday, accusing me of infidelity. He showed me the evidence, compromising photos and suggestive messages between another man and me, supposedly found on my phone. But I never sent those messages. It's taken me completely by surprise because I've never been unfaithful to Jasper, and I don't know how all this happened. Let me tell you something. Throughout all this time, I have not cheated on Jasper. I love him with all my heart. We've been together since college. If I'm honest, our marriage, although not perfect, has always seemed perfect to me. So, I never felt the need to betray him. Even if the marriage hadn't been perfect, I wouldn't have done it because I don't believe it's right. However, he has a pretty hefty collection of evidence against me, and if I received it, I would also think it was real. It's as if someone carefully crafted a narrative to destroy my reputation. I don't know if this is Jasper's excuse to divorce me, looking for a reason, or if someone has been playing mind games with me to ruin my marriage. I have a suspicion of who might be behind all this. My mother. I've always had an unhealthy relationship with her due to how she is and how she has treated me for as long as I can remember. She has shown an obvious preference for my younger siblings. It was little things, though sometimes not so little, that made it clear that she loved them more. It often felt like I was the child she wished she didn't have. I won't deny that my self-esteem suffered growing up, especially when favoritism was more evident. It's something I can't explain in words. You can only understand when you've lived it. I've met people with parents who show this kind of favoritism and they feel the same way. My father's presence made things more bearable in a way, but since he worked to support the family and put food on the table, he didn't spend much time with me, and I was mostly with my mom. Over time, I began to see her as if she wasn't my mother. It relates not only to what she did to me, but also to something I recently discovered. I was visiting my parents over the weekend, helping my mom with chores because I didn't want to go there and just sit around when I saw her phone light up with a notification. It wasn't a normal text message or a social media alert. It was a message from someone that was saved, which was my first sign that something was off. The only thing I could read was a message that said, "I can't wait to see you tonight." I mean, you find a message on your mom's phone that sounds like that, and it's not from your dad, and you just let it go? My curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't help but look further while my mom was outside doing some gardening. I don't usually go around checking phones, but I thought this situation justified it, not just out of curiosity, but because this could be important for my dad. I kept reading the message, and there was no doubt about what it was about. There were more: romantic messages, explicit photos, and plans to meet up. The photos were particularly disgusting, which almost made me throw the phone across the kitchen. The unanimous verdict was that my mother was having an affair. The texts were absolutely revolting, filled with details about their secret meetings. They even talked about my dad derisively for not knowing what they were doing. I felt bad for myself, but I felt even worse for my dad. Let's be honest, no child wants to see photos of their mother sent to her lover. That would surely earn you a few therapy sessions, and if there were electroshock therapy available to erase those memories, I'd sign up. But I knew this would be much worse for my dad, a person who didn't deserve any of this. Well, no one deserves it, but especially not my dad, who is the kindest person I know. I was ready to go out to the garden and have a conversation with her. I didn't care if the neighbors heard. I was going to tell her everything to her face and speak at the loudest possible tone. But instead, I decided to wait and think things through. I believed it would be better if my dad did this since I wanted him to have more information than my mom in case of a divorce. He deserved to know the whole truth while my mother should continue thinking everything was fine. So, I simply told her I was going out to avoid being around her, and I just returned late at bedtime. I don't know if I should have called her during that time, because that night I barely slept. I couldn't stop running the messages over in my head and thinking about the best-case scenarios and what the consequences would be. There was no way to turn off my brain, not even for a few hours of sleep. The next day, I decided that no matter what happened, I needed to tell everything. But there wasn't time before I could be alone with my dad because he left for work early, leaving me alone with her. The worst part is that I suspect she might have read the message and came to confront me, thinking I hadn't talked to my dad yet, which I hadn't. She said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, and she would end it immediately. I told her that was the best thing she could do, but at the same time, she had to confess to Dad. I wasn't going to keep this secret from my dad. He deserved to know the truth. I gave her a deadline. She had a week to tell him, or I would. She accepted, but I could tell she was buying time, trying to delay things. I stood firm and left it up to her to decide. Meanwhile, I tried to continue with my life, but I kept checking my phone to see if I had a message from my dad. He had returned home, but the only messages I received from him were the typical ones, asking how my days were going. I kept asking my mom if she had told him, but she always had an excuse. She needed the right moment or said she was trying to figure out how to tell him without breaking his heart. About 5 days later, she called me and said she had ended things with the man and that we should bury this secret for the sake of my dad and my other 2 siblings. I told her no, and that I planned to visit them again to tell my dad in person what I knew. I don't live too far from my parents' house, just a few towns away, but enough that I don't see them as often as I'd like, at least with my dad. I planned to go visit on Saturday morning when my dad would be there all day. I didn't want to tell him just before going to work. I wanted to give him time to prepare his things. On Friday night, I went out with some friends and saw my mom leaving a club and getting into a car. Yes, it was the same guy she was cheating on my dad with. I recognized his face, although he was now dressed differently. I asked a friend to follow them, and the car stopped in front of a motel. My mom and her lover came out of it. It turned out she was still in contact with him and had lied to me. But now I had a few photos of her still. I didn't want her to have one last big night, so I went after her and confronted her right then and there, but she wasn't even embarrassed or anything. She just told me to mind my own business and walked into the room. I said, "Well, if you want to play like this, it's time I tell everything to my dad." She didn't care and entered the room as if nothing had happened. The plan was still to visit my dad very early Saturday morning, but my husband had other plans for me. I didn't mention it, but he is deeply religious and values honesty and loyalty above all. When I woke up early, he was sitting on the couch with his phone in hand, looking tired as if he hadn't slept all night, which he probably hadn't. He had images of text messages between another man and me on his phone. The messages were graphic, just like the ones he liked to send to my mom. I tried to explain to him that someone must have hacked my phone or that the evidence was false, but he didn't believe me. For him, the evidence was irrefutable. He said he had trusted me completely, and now he realized it had all been a waste of time. I begged him to give me a chance to prove my innocence. I told him I could show him my phone or do whatever he thought to see that I wasn't lying. However, by then, he probably had already deleted all the evidence. Besides, he had already made the decision to divorce me. As you can see, it's impossible not to think that it's my mother behind all this because she didn't care that I discovered her. She had a plan, and now she has ruined my life because I was going to ruin hers. I've been here in my house for many hours alone, thinking about Jasper. He's gone, and I haven't seen my dad because now I'm dealing with all this. It's not that I won't tell him. I will tell him, and my mother will suffer. I'll make sure my dad gives her a harsh punishment when he divorces her. That is for sure. Still, my post is to ask how I can prove my innocence. It's not like my mother is going to confess, and Jasper doesn't care to believe anything but the images he received. Perhaps other people may think of things I haven't considered until now. Update 1. I went to my parents' house and confronted her. Of course, she didn't admit to anything. That would have been too easy instead. She deflected the conversation and manipulated me, throwing accusations and questioning my sanity. She said that if I had been unfaithful, I should face the consequences of my actions. My mom went to these extremes not out of hatred toward me, but to protect herself. She knew I would tell my dad about her affair, and if that happened, her whole world would crumble. Her marriage, her social reputation, everything she had built. So she decided to discredit me preemptively, making me look like the unfaithful one. That way, she could turn any accusation I made against her into lies born out of my supposed guilt. Even so, I decided to tell my dad the truth with proof and everything I had against her. The most heartbreaking moment came when I finally gathered the courage to tell my dad the truth. I thought I had the key piece to clear my name and expose her lies, but she beat me to it. She had already positioned herself, telling a version in which I was the unfaithful one, and was trying to cover my mistakes by blaming her. It was diabolical. My dad listened to me, but he had doubts because my mother said the photos and images were probably edited. My mom had sown enough suspicion for him to question everything I said. He asked me why his own wife would lie about her daughter. I was left speechless. Of course, he would trust his wife, with whom he's been for 30 years, more than me. Now, I feel trapped in a nightmare. My dad looks at me differently, as if he's trying to figure out if I'm the daughter he thought he knew. To him, I'm the unfaithful daughter who can't face her problems and needs to blame others. My marriage is in ruins, and my mother walks around in a state of victory, pretending nothing happened. My mother has done a lot of horrible things during this time, but reaching these levels is something I never expected. Instead, she destroyed everything to save her own skin. I wouldn't say I feel betrayed. After all, she's my mother, and I know very well what she's like. But something inside me feels strange. It's not anger or betrayal. It's simply a desire to ruin her life until there's nothing left. I won't give up. If she wants to play with heavy ammunition, then that's what I'm going to give her. This is just a blow to me, but when I'm done with her, she will wish she never had me. I'm sure she already does. I think she would have rather not messed with me. Update 2. I'm sorry it has taken me so long to update. Since all this happened, I've moved back in with my parents. It's not an ideal situation living under the same roof as my mom after discovering her betrayal. It's like walking through a minefield. But I'm going to use this to infiltrate here and destroy my mother's life, like I said I would. Plus, with my divorce still in process and nowhere else to go, it seems like the only option. At first, I thought that being here I could gather more evidence against her. If I can find even a shred of evidence to expose her lies, maybe I can clear my name with my dad and repair some of the damage she caused. But my mom is cunning, almost disturbingly so. Her phone is completely factory reset. She doesn't make suspicious calls and never leaves any trace of her bad actions. She is so composed and calculated that it's exasperating. Every time I try to catch her making a mistake, I end up with empty hands, as if she's mocking me without needing to say a word. Desperation can make you do crazy things. One day, while I was in my room, I started thinking about my mom's affair. How long has this been going on? Does she have other secrets? This isn't just an idea I pulled out of nowhere. I got it from reading you all in the comments. An unfaithful person doesn't cheat just once, or for a brief period. My mother has probably been doing this for a long time and with different people. It was then that the idea came to me. A DNA test could lead to nothing. But if the test came back, as I expected, goodbye, mother. If my mom has been unfaithful for years, maybe there's something buried in our family history that reveals the truth. My siblings and I have never questioned our paternity before. We never had reasons to do so, but now seemed like a good time to do so. So I secretly ordered a DNA kit for myself, my 17-year-old brother, and my 13-year-old sister. Collecting the samples was tricky. I waited for the perfect moments to gather them, be it hair, saliva from a cup, or a toothbrush. Anything without raising suspicion. It felt wrong, even invasive, but I was desperate. Weeks later, the results arrived. I opened mine first. Fortunately, I was 100% compatible with my dad. For a brief moment, I felt like I was just wasting my money and time. But then I opened my brother's results. He was not a match. Then I opened my sister's. She also wasn't a match. My brother is 17, and my sister is 13. We are talking about infidelities that happened a long time ago. My mom has a lot of experience being unfaithful because she has been doing it for a long time. My brother and sister have no idea, and my dad has been raising kids who aren't even his, while my mom thinks she can keep ruining lives as if they don't matter. I don't even know where to start now. Now I have very concrete evidence. It's not that I didn't have evidence before, but if my dad decides not to believe me again, he can go and have the tests done himself and then tell me how it went. Update 3. Although the DNA results are irrefutable proof of my mother's infidelity, I decided not to confront her directly without a plan. I can't take the risk of her twisting the story again. She's too good at manipulating, and I've seen how easily she plants doubts in people's minds. If I'm going to expose her, I need recorded confessions so there's no way she can wiggle her way out. So a few days passed. I carefully observed her, looking for an opportunity. She continues to act as if nothing is wrong, completely calm and confident that I won't be able to prove anything. Then one day, the opportunity came. My dad was at work, my siblings at school, and the house was quiet. I decided it was now or never. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket, activated the recording app, and went downstairs to confront her. My heart pounded hard as I approached her. I told her I knew about her affairs and the truth about my siblings. For a moment, she seems surprised, but then her expression quickly changes. She realizes I'm plotting something and demands to see my phone, but I refuse. Then she snatches it from me and crashes it against the floor. As I watch it get destroyed, I feel powerless and furious. The situation escalates quickly, and she starts mocking me for trying to outsmart her. She accuses me of conspiring against her. Maybe it was her excessive arrogance, but that's when she starts admitting things. She says she never loved my dad and only stayed with him for his money. She reveals that my brother and sister aren't my dad's kids, but the result of her long-term affair with a man she really loved. Trust is the best way to obtain confessions, and my mother was giving me everything she knew. She made it clear that she didn't care about either of us, Dad or me. She even said I was just a reminder of the life she hated, something she had to deal with for years. It was worse than I thought. Not only did she not mind cheating, but she didn't care about my dad at all. I know this because she said she was only with my dad so he could support her kids while she could live without worrying with another man. However, she knew she wasn't going to be so foolish as to say all this, knowing I could be recording her with my phone. So when she destroyed the phone, it was my old phone that already had some issues. My new phone was in my pocket recording everything. If you think this is bad for my mother, I want to warn you that I'm just getting started. Every time I discover something about her, I feel more and more inclined to take revenge. Update 4. We are at an update that is going to be crazy. It will be hard to tell all this due to the number of things that have happened, but here goes. I had made a decision. I was packing my things, ready to leave this toxic disaster behind. I couldn't stand being in this house for another minute not with her. My mother, regardless of what happened with my dad, I still needed to get out of there. My work was already done. I didn't have anywhere to go, but surely I could ask a friend to let me stay a while until I discovered what was going on. What I knew was that I didn't want to stick around for when everything blew up. I had almost finished packing when I heard it. At first, it was a low murmur, and I tried to make as little noise as possible to hear what was happening. I still couldn't hear too well. Maybe I was a little deaf and needed to go to the doctor because I was missing out on some of the gossip. But everything was settled when the voices grew louder, and then I heard it. It was my dad. He was screaming. I had never heard him yell like that before, but I knew what was happening downstairs. I just wasn't there to witness it. I ran downstairs to find something better than I had imagined. My dad was standing in the living room shouting at my mom. His face was red, his hands trembling, and there, in the middle of it all, was my brother, looking completely devastated, crying. Beside him was our little sister Lucy, looking scared as if she didn't quite understand what was happening. But I did. My dad was shouting, asking my mom how long she had been lying to him, demanding answers about my siblings, asking if they were really his. My mom stood there frozen as if she were trapped by an invisible lightning bolt that wouldn't let her move. Here's the thing. Before I started packing, I left the DNA test documents and the recording on a memory stick, and I went upstairs to finish packing. In that period of time, which could have been 30 minutes, he read and listened to everything, leading us to this moment. My mom couldn't escape this. She couldn't manipulate the truth this time. My dad asked if all that was true, and I said yes. If he still doubted, he could have the test done himself and confirm it. He also saw my bags and asked where I was going. But I told him I wasn't going to stay there for a second longer than I needed to. What I needed to do was done, and now they could sort out their own things. My dad said they weren't going to fix anything between them because my mom was about to leave soon when she finished taking some of her belongings to move out right now. She finally found her voice and said she wasn't going to leave. I told them it didn't matter how they resolved it, but I was leaving. I also wasn't going to let my brother and sister get stuck in the middle of this disaster. I wasn't going to let them go through this alone. I grabbed both of them by the arm and led them out of the house. My mom and dad could fight among themselves. They could destroy each other. They could sort out their mess, but my brother and sister needed me now, and I wasn't going to let them face this alone. Update 5. My parents are officially divorced now. It has been the fastest divorce in history. No child support, no spousal support, nothing for my mother. But the divorce is just a part of everything my dad is doing against my mom. He has filed a lawsuit against her for cheating on him all these years. He wants back all the money he invested in God knows what, which wasn't his. My mother thought he would go back to her lover and everything would be fine. Wrong thought. Maybe she loved him, but for him, she was just a woman he slept with. She wasn't even the only one. On top of being a wife and mother, she also had other lovers on the side. Yes, the perfect example of a husband and man we have here. She's currently living with her sister, who is the only one who has taken her in right now. Maybe that's because her marriage ended the same way, although without children that weren't the father's. She should learn from her as a lesson since her sister is now living in a very small place where the extra room is a basement, and that's where my mother is living. As for my siblings, they have stayed with my dad. He has accepted them as if they were completely his. I see him making an effort to be a better father. I never thought I'd see this side of him. He has been so patient with my brother and sister, trying to heal all the damage my mother caused. My mother has joint custody, but none of my siblings wants to live with her now or even see her. I'm not the only one. For those asking about Jasper, our divorce has also been finalized. He tried to use my mother's evidence to leave me with nothing in the divorce. But the judge saw that evidence as false and an attempted scam. He was fined and had to agree to give me half of the marital assets. Yes, he even wanted us to reconcile when the judge told him they were fake. And only then did he realize it. With my lawyer, we reviewed the captured images he gave us as evidence, and we noticed lots of details showing they had been edited. At first glance, they looked real, but Jasper had to wait for a judge to tell him. That's why I haven't gone back to him. He trusted those images more than what I told him and wasn't able to give me even one chance. Why should I give him one? For those who asked, yes, I have a job. I only took some time off when everything crumbled in my marriage. I needed time to get back at my mother, and I think I used those vacation days quite well because a trip to the beach wouldn't have given me the same satisfaction. Even so, I'm not done with my mother. There's still my lawsuit for destroying my marriage and the lawsuit from Jasper for putting him in trouble with the altered images. On top of that, there's my dad's paternity fraud lawsuit against her. Karma is still waiting for my mother, and I won't rest until she has nothing left. Update 6. Reading my previous post to remember where I left off, it makes me laugh to think that I said I wouldn't rest until I made my mother pay for everything. Well, the time has come for my rest. I feel like a Viking resting in Valhalla. My father has gotten back part of what he lost due to the paternity fraud. If you're wondering how much we're talking about, it's a sum close to the mid-six figures. My mother has only been able to pay a portion, which is what she received after the divorce. She chose to keep the savings money instead of the house, but had to return it to my dad to pay for her fraud. Let's remember this is fraud involving children who are indeed mine, but who don't even want to see her. My older brother has opted to block her, while my little sister spit on her clothes the day she came to pick her up to spend time with Mommy. My mother told her it was time for them to be together, and my sister responded with that spit. With me, she didn't even try to have her mommy time, and better that way because it wouldn't have been a spit she would have received from me. It would have been mommy time on the floor, getting kicked in the ribs. Jasper also won his lawsuit. He only received the equivalent of the fine he had to pay during the divorce. As for my lawsuit about being the cause of ruining my marriage, I got a compensation of $25,000. Even so, I don't think that was enough to ruin his life. However, the fact that he has nowhere to live now makes me feel like her life has crumbled. I can see her sleeping on a park bench on the way to work, now that even her sister has thrown her out of her house. I expected my mother to at least contribute some money for living with her, but that woman, a true leech, doesn't know what work is, nor will she ever. So now she's out on the street. Now that I've ruined her life, I feel at peace. I know it's not what those who asked me not to take revenge on my mother were hoping for, but it's what my heart needed, and I'm going to listen to my heart, not a bunch of serial forgivers who let themselves be trampled and still say thank you while they do it. I'm sorry if this isn't the ending you were hoping for. From the very beginning, it was clear that my mother and I wouldn't end up singing around a campfire. I could even be considered good because my first reaction to seeing her sleeping there is to go destroy that bench so she doesn't even have a place to sleep. That's the level of hatred I have for her.